your buyers are not aware of the problem. They're not aware that they're feeling that problem, and they're not aware of how critical that problem is. All of a sudden, you're going to educate them. But I think the education piece cannot start with the product. I think a lot of category creation fails when you show up with the product, and then the customer who is not sure of the problem, you haven't sold them the problem yet. You jumped 3 steps ahead and you try to shove the solution down their throat. And they're like, I don't need this stuff. Human behavior is you're going to take them from a positive present to a negative present, then to a positive future. So I think a lot of salespeople and founders try to take people from a positive present to a positive future, skipping that in between process. They love the product, they love this future, they love this future, they love this integration, they love whatever this report or whatever the case is. But it never gets to the core issue, which is the ROI, right? Which is efficiency, cost savings, or revenue generation, right? So you got to try to quantify, have your customers quantify, and have your team quantify the value. The moment you do that, you get alignment between sales, marketing, and customer success. If you're selling into little small companies, transactional business, all the way to the enterprise, there are complete different motions that you can think through, right? And SMB is a very, short and sweet and fast sales cycle. So you need different talent, you need a different motion, you need a different unique value proposition. Your focus has to be on the SMB side on efficiency and how you can actually start, the machine, and you can build the machine and really get deals through pretty fast. Knowing the personas that you sell to, are you selling to a CFO? Are you selling to a CIO? And understanding how they buy, and then really aligning and tailoring your sales process to how they buy and to their ICP. Again, I'm kind of oversimplifying, but that's the science and the art. I assess the talent. I look at the people, and I think because if you've got the right people on the bus, if you've got the right people on the team, if you got the right talent with the right attitude and discipline and energy and thought leadership and character and all that stuff, I think that's the most important thing. Control the controllables. You can control the talent, you control the people. You can definitely fine tune, continue to get really relentless with your execution and the market. So if the market is in your favor, you've got the right talent, and then you're executing, that's a perfect combination, right? I think those 3 things have become the main pillars that I look at when I first come in. You're going to try and see what your market, what your customers are consuming. Where are they consuming this content? What's the emergency? What's the crises that's keeping them up at night? And I think if you can create a content between your marketing people, your outbound team, your inbound team, and your salespeople, and they kind of collaborate, I think that combination is the best combination. So my only advice to startups, and I've done a couple of them, is you got to really get obsessive with your ICP, your ideal customer profile, and your buyer persona. And you got to try to figure out as soon as you can, who these people are. I think most of your go-to-market problems will fix itself.
So thanks a lot for joining us. So Baris,
Sure.
Tell us a bit about yourself and what are you up to right nowadays?
Yeah, so I've joined this company about a year ago. I did 2 private equity exits in the last 8 years. Really they were very successful. One was more of in the security. The other one was in CAD, CAD software and design, and both were private equity owned out of San Francisco, called Golden Gate Capital. And then, I guess when you get sucked into the private equity world, they kind of, they have a 3-year, 5-year investment period, and then they kind of exit and sell and move on. So I got a call back from the same private equity owners about a year ago. They bought this company called Smartlinx. And then they said, hey, we bought this new portfolio company. We're looking for a new CRO. We know you, we trust you. You've done a couple of exits with us. Can you come along and enjoy the ride? So here I am. So I work for Smartlinx. I am the Chief Revenue Officer. I'm in charge of sales, marketing, customer success, revenue operations, solution engineering, services, basically everything that touches revenue in the company. So that's kind of like what I've been doing lately.
Yeah, so that's awesome. So obviously you've worked with startups, you've worked with mid-size customers, you've worked with enterprise customers. So how does the play differs and maybe some of the things that are common amongst all of those. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, well, that's a good question.
Okay.
So, uh,
Okay.
so like, I think when you think about startups, or when you think about companies kind of do SMB or mid market or enterprise or any of those spectrums, you almost have to I think the best companies really understand the buyer journey. And I think, they understand how their customers buy, what their ICP is, their ideal customer profile is. And I think if you look at, if you're selling into little small companies, transactional business, all the way to the enterprise, there are complete different motions that you can think through, right? And SMB, is a very, short and sweet and fast sales cycle. So you need different talent, you need a different motion, you need a different unique value proposition. Your focus has to be on the SMB side, on efficiency and how you can actually start, the machine, and you can build the machine and really get deals through pretty fast. And I think it's more about the efficiency. But I think on the enterprise, on the large end side, whether you're a startup or you're an established company or a large company, I think on the enterprise it's more complex, because the enterprise, you're talking to multiple buyers. You're not only talking to one person or two people, you're probably talking, I think there was a book about complex sale, I can't remember the challenger sale. And they were talking about today, there are 7.5 buyers in an enterprise sales cycle, right? And I think, so it's the ability to understand, how do those people buy? What does their buyer's journey look like on the enterprise? And I think it really comes down to knowing your ICP, your ideal customer profile, whether it's SMB or enterprise, knowing the personas that you sell to. Are you selling to a CFO? Are you selling to a CIO? Are you selling to a CFO? And understanding how they buy, and then really aligning and tailoring your sales process to how they buy and to their ICP. Again, I'm kind of oversimplifying, but that's the science and the art. There is a bit of the art that goes into building that go-to-market for those different personas and different markets, and then there's also a science, the machine, the marketing machine, the sales machine, and the customer success machine that you have to kind of think through. So it's kind of like a connected journey on both sides. So I wouldn't say SMB is easier or enterprises are harder. I think they have their more complexity. It really depends on your target markets, your personas, and your product and your value proposition. So that's why go-to-market is so complex. I think we as CROs make a lot of mistakes trying to apply one learning and then to another. But what you do and what makes an enterprise work, or what works in a startup, doesn't necessarily scale for larger companies, or vice versa. How many times you've seen a CRO come from a very large company and then has the playbook, and then tries to apply that playbook to a smaller company? It never works, right? Companies are in different stages. Companies are in different stages in their evolution. So I think knowing where the company is in their evolution, whether small, medium, or large, and what problems they're trying to solve for who, I think those are the things that once you spend time obsessively on those areas, and you create your playbook along the way, I think that's what makes go-to-market exciting.
Oh, okay, that's an awesome answer. So if you can't read the room, you shouldn't be in sales. So you somehow agree to this. So why is that?
So I'll tell you a story. I posted that, and I can't remember when I posted it, but I think I was working for this global company, and then we had a customer in France. I don't speak French, so I don't know a word of French. So I'm sitting in this room, and like customers, you want them to feel comfortable. You want them to feel comfortable in their own language, right? Sometimes they struggle to articulate their problems or their needs in a different language. So we said, look, just have the conversation in French. We had people in our company that spoke the language. So I'm sitting in this room, and it's funny because all I can do is read the room, right? Like I'm trying to look at the body language, look at their gestures, looking at how they're leaning in. Are they leaning in? Are they arms crossed? Are they, responding positively? That's all I could do, right? Like, because you don't know the spoken word, you don't understand where the conversation is going. So anyway, long story short, and then an hour and a half conversation goes by, and all I'm doing is looking at the human cues, right? The social cues and the nonverbal cues. And then at the end of the meeting, I could tell it was a positive meeting, right? I could tell, although I didn't understand a single word that was spoken in that meeting, I could tell the vibe. I can tell the CFO was kind of like, positive. I can tell who was kind of a little bit on the reserve and pushing back without even understanding this. So I think that's important because I think as salespeople or any go-to-market people, whether you're leaders or you're in the trenches or you're an individual contributor or you're a manager, I think we all have to kind of stop and read the room, right?
Okay.
We almost have to not even look for the verbal. I think we get caught up in what's being spoken and what's being said, and then we come up with our own interpretation. But I think we lose the context, right? We lose the context. So that experience in itself told me, even if I'm understanding the language in the room, I think you have to look beyond that. So at the end of the meeting, we're in the car, we're heading back to the hotel, and I told my team, my French team, I said, I feel like that meeting went positive, and they're like, "You speak French?" I said, "No, I don't want to speak French. I don't understand it." And they're like, "Yes, the meeting went really well, and the CFO was saying this, and I think these were the action items that we discussed. These were the kind of the next steps that we discussed, and we feel like it was a positive meeting." But then they kept asking me. They're like, "How did you know?" And then I started telling them all these things that I witnessed that they did not see. Right?
Okay.
Because they were not paying attention to the nonverbal cues. So it was a good learning for everybody.
Yeah. Okay. That's awesome. So you come in with the PE companies, and you're actually coming in maybe in the middle of the company's journey, and they have their objectives. So they pretty much would want to turn things around within a certain period of time and exit. Okay. So that's where you've been playing your role. Now, as a CRO, what's your play like? So you just come in. So how are you thinking about bringing in the change, doing the same thing, people, processes? Like how do you think about bringing in that particular returns for your PE guys?
Yeah. So if the question, let me clarify the question. If the question is, what are my first moves? Like when I come in, what are the first 2, 3, 4 things that I do? Look, I mean, there's no magic. I don't know there's a silver bullet or a magic bullet. I think over the years I've learned it starts with people. That's where I start first. I assess the talent. I look at the people, and I think because if you've got the right people on the bus, if you've got the right people on the team, if you've got the right talent with the right attitude and discipline and energy and thought leadership and character and all that stuff, I think that's the most important thing. And so that's what I look at first. Do I have the right team? Do I have the right people? Because if you check that, and that becomes a check, then the second thing is the execution, right? So I look at how is this company executing? How are they executing against their goals? What do the goals mean? Are they all aligned on the goals? Is everybody kind of speaking the same language in terms of, goal alignment, KPIs, and what's the North Star? Where's everybody's North Star? Is everybody's North Star different? So I think I look at the execution. I look at how they're executing. Are they executing? Because I think, when you have the right talent, you got that covered. And sometimes a lot of companies fail in the execution piece of it because you got a plan. Everybody's got targets. Everybody's got these, humongous, growth goals or whatever goals they have, and then they struggle in the execution. Right? There are great operators, there are great managers, and then there are great executors. And I think you need to have a good mix of those 3 things. to make sure that the company's performing and the company's being productively and effectively executing against those targets. And I think the third one is the market. I used to do it the other way around. I always used to look at the market. Is the market in our favor? Is the market behaving the way we want it to behave? Is the market giving us tailwinds in terms of the products and the solutions that we provide? Because the market you cannot control. The market is market, right? I mean, you have COVID, everything goes down, the demand comes down because I cannot control the demand. If the demand of the market is not there, doesn't matter if I have the right people on the bus and they're great people and we're executing heavily. If the market is causing headwinds against my execution and my people, there's so much you can do. So control the controllables. You can control the talent. You control the people. You can get the right people on the bus, or exit the wrong people from the bus. You can definitely fine tune, continue to get really relentless with your execution and the market. So if the market is in your favor, you've got the right talent, and then you're executing. That's a perfect combination, right? I think those three things have become the main pillars that I look at when I first come in. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. So what are your favorite KPIs whenever you're evaluating your inbound or your outbound successes? Like, what's on your dashboard at the moment? Okay, you're looking at consistently.
Favorite KPI. That's a good one. I've never heard of it framed that way.
Okay.
I don't know if I have a favorite KPI, Saad, but
okay.
I think they're all my favorite. But I think it's everything that touches the pipeline is my. I would with my KPI. So what do I mean by that? Are we having enough leads at the top of the funnel, right? Because this goes back to the execution, the second piece that I talked about, right? So, you can control, as much as you can control the top of your pipe, you can do a lot of outbound, you can get really creative with inbound, you can do phenomenal things with creating the right content that resonates with your buyers so that you can really do a lot of inbound campaigns and generate a lot of leads. So assume that you've got your top of the pipe, and no CRO or no sales executive will tell you that they have enough pipe, right? Everybody's number one problem that keeps them up at night is not enough pipe. But I think in terms of the KPI, do I have enough pipe? Number one. Continue to monitor that. Is the demand? Am I capturing the demand? And am I addressing the demand? Number one. Number two, it's all the conversion throughout the funnel from the top to the bottom, right? Where do I have bottlenecks? Where are the deals getting stuck, right? Is it my sales talent? Do I need to train them, enable them, give them all the tools that they need? Is it in the execution? Is it the product? Is it our value proposition? Is it pricing? Is it competitive pressures that we're getting? So I think you need to look at how the deals are moving down the funnel and look at those conversions, right? Your win rates, your conversion rates, your every KPI that you can monitor along the way. And is your ICP, your ideal customer profile, in that funnel, or do you have a bunch of non-ICPs in that funnel that's causing anomalies that you have to address? That's one thing, and I think all the way to the close. So I think to a CRO, that's the most important thing. Looking at your funnel, looking at the pipeline, and looking at, do I have enough at the top? Am I converting at the bottom? And what is the bottleneck? Where do these deals get stuck? Then you've got 80% there.
Okay. So in terms of aligning, so obviously you're working with your marketing team, you're working with your sales team, and then your customer success. How do you align all of those together? Because there are a lot of people work in silos, they have these difficulties working with one another. How do you make sure that they work together as a team?
Yeah, so I think the best way to get alignment between your sales, your marketing, your customer success, your RevOps, I think everybody needs to understand the value that you deliver to your customers. What is that? What is that? I think a lot of companies, including my company, sometimes, I think in the beginning of the year, you do these SKOs, these sales kickoffs and stuff like that. I started doing at every SKO, having sessions with all of these departments, all these functions on what is the value that we really believe that we're delivering to our customers, right? What is that? And I think keep questioning that. And I think the moment you start questioning everybody in the company on, the 2 or the 3, the 4 main values that we bring, are we saving them money? Are we helping them with revenue? Are we helping them with efficiency? Is it compliance? Is it regulation? Are we mitigating risk, business risk, government risks, or compliance risk? Whatever your value is, I think you need to keep refining that. And I think the moment you get everybody behind your marketing, your sales, your customer success on that, and defining like, what does success look like? What does success mean to your customers? How do they define success? Not how they define the value that they're getting out of your product, but how do they define success? Honestly, Saad, I ask this question to my customers. Like every opportunity that I get when I'm talking to customers, I ask them this question. I said, walk me through. We've been partners for the last 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. Like, can you walk me through? Without my product, without our solution, what would you lose? What are the things that you would not get? So when you frame the question that way, because if you frame it like the classical frame, which is tell me the value and the ROI you're getting from my product, customers typically respond to that question with features and functions. They never give you an ROI. They never give you an ROI. They never give you the value. They tell you, they start talking about your product, which is the stuff that you already know. I mean, you should know, right? And then you're kind of nodding. You're like, yep, they get it. They love the product. They love this feature. They love this feature. They love this integration. They love whatever this report or whatever the case is. But it never gets to the core issue, which is the ROI, right? Which is efficiency, cost savings, revenue generation, right? So you got to try to quantify, have your customers quantify, and have your team quantify the value. The moment you do that, you get alignment between sales, marketing, and customer success. Right? Because all of a sudden, everybody's saying, yes, if we're not delivering this deliverable as a value, and if we're not quantifying the money that they're saving with this one little thing that our product does, if we're having a hard time quantifying that, then we're going to have churn. So customer success is going to have problems. Our sales team is not going to be able to convert against our competitors because we're not being clear on what value we can deliver to these customers, right? And your marketing is kind of spitballing. They don't know what messaging and what value really resonates with your customers. So you almost have to get them all aligned.
Okay, so this is great, but this is the situation where you're working with data that you have or the customers that you have. So let's just consider a situation of a new startup. They're trying to build their GTM motion. So they want to maybe go after the mid-market, SMB sector or something of that sort. How should they think about it? I mean, let's just talk about the place. Should they focus more towards the inbound? Is it like should be very much outbound focus? Is it like event focus? Is it like a personal brand, celebrity, CEO focus? Like, where should they start?
Yeah, I love the question. Startups. I love startups. Startups are fantastic, and I think it kind of keeps you on your toes because you're constantly pivoting. You're constantly innovating. You're constantly, figuring out, right? Like you're always in the figure out mode. And I think, unfortunately, most startups fail because I think they either give up in that figuring out mode, or while they're trying to figure out, they kind of get distracted, right? They kind of like, what's my ICP? Is it this? Is it that? And the other? So they have a hard time staying focused, or they get really passionate about the product and the solution and not really listen to the market and what the real customer needs. So I think I will say the same things I just said for the startup a little differently. But for a startup, it's everything I said, but you almost have to, because a startup, you got a founder, or you got founders and co-founders, and you got a CEO and a founder and a couple co-founders. What are they doing? They're doing exactly what I just said, without the scale, which is you have an idea, maybe you have a prototype, right? And you're testing that idea constantly. How are you testing that idea? You're talking to, you believe, you kind of have a good idea of what your ICP is. You don't have data to prove it yet, but you kind of have a good idea of like who you should sell this to. And you're getting in front of those people. You're going to make sure, and you're kind of constantly thinking, you know, who's my buying persona, right? Whose problem am I fixing? Is it the CFO's problem? Is it the COO's problem? Or is it the CTO's problem? Who's going to write me the check for this, right? Who's going to own it? So that's one. And I think you're constantly monitoring. Remember the pipeline example I gave? You're constantly monitoring how you get a lead, whether you got a lead from inbound or outbound, and I'll touch on that a little bit. So let's say you're in front of a prospect. So you're testing your value proposition, you're testing your pitch. Do you watch Shark Tank?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, so it's the 5-minute pitch or the 2-minute elevator pitch, right? So you're constantly working on your value prop. You're constantly working on your pitch, your elevator pitch, your 5-minute pitch, your 10-minute pitch, and you're seeing if it's resonating, because you almost have to read the room, right? You almost have to look at, you know, whatever is coming out of your mouth. Is the person that you're trying to sell to, are they the right persona? Is it resonating with them? What's their reaction look like? And is that deal moving along the pipe? Meaning, are you figuring out how they're buying versus how you're selling? Are you trying to figure out how they go from a demo, like initial meeting, to a demo, and then they get other people involved, and then they make the decision? There is a catalyst, there is a reason to move, there is a there is a compelling event for them to take this to the next step, because now they feel like your solution addresses their problem. So you almost have to look at that science part of the deal making, and then how these deals are moving forward. So I think for a startup, it's exactly that, but you're not doing that at scale because you don't have 30, 40, 50 deals in the pipeline. You almost have 1 or 2, but that's a starting point. You almost have to apply the same logic to the 1 and 2 deals that you're working with. And in terms of inbound and outbound, look, I mean, I think as a startup, you got to keep trying everything, right? You got to go to the shows, to the events that your ICP and your buyer personas are showing up. You almost have to make some bets. So my only advice to startups, and I've done a couple of them, is you got to really get obsessive with your ICP, your ideal customer profile, and your buyer persona. And you got to try to figure out as soon as you can, who these people are, right? Your ideal customer profile and your buyer persona. The sooner you figure that out, I think most of your go-to-market problems will fix itself.
So you figure it out. So let's just get deeper into this. So obviously there's ICP, and people say, okay, this ICP should have this kind of a pain point. So is that definition correct? Because I feel like maybe the definition can be, do they have the frustration and they're not finding the solution, and that's where you come in. So how do you think about like ICP? How do you develop that into pain point and then messaging, and then you go from there?
Yeah. We just did this a few weeks back, so it's all fresh in my head. We made a list of, in our industry, what's keeping these people up at night? What's the way we framed it is, what's the crisis? There's always a crisis, right? Because if your solution, if your value prop, it just falls short because it's just a nice to have. But if your value prop and the product and the solution that you have, whether you're a startup or you're an established company, addresses a crisis, that's very important, because somebody owns that crisis. Somebody owns that urgency. There is an urgency. There is a fire on the second floor, okay? Or there is a flooding in the basement.
Okay.
There is an urgency. There is an emergency that is happening, and I think you gotta push yourself to, as you think about your ICP, the first question you need to ask yourself is, what emergency are they dealing with? And I think this, the answer to that question is you got to talk to your ICP, you got to talk to those personas, and they will tell you. And I think over time you'll start developing a recurring theme on, I talked to 20 people, and out of the 20 people, I believe they're my ICP and my buying persona. Maybe they're not all of them, but you'll start, a trend starts emerging, right? A hypothesis starts emerging among those 20, 30, 40 conversations that you have. And then you almost have an epiphany. You kind of say, okay, these two things are the commonality between all of these ICPs that I spoke to. And out of these two, this number one issue is the most critical issue. So, and now that helps you with your value prop. That helps you with your product go-to-market. That helps you with your product market fit, because sometimes it happened to us. I'll give you an example. We thought we had a phenomenal product that addressed that urgency. But the moment our customers started buying our product, they started using it differently. They started using it for different use cases and different reasons. Then when we started interviewing them, we found out, holy crap, we thought it was this compliance issue, but it was actually this other reporting that they had to provide to the government, which was actually keeping them up at night. So why don't we build that, right? And we did. So I think that alignment between the urgency and the emergency and the crisis kind of touches to your product market fit, and you're constantly going back and forth between that. I think refining that is fun, it's exciting, but it's also challenging. And I think if you get that right, then you're onto something.
Yeah, and let's just suppose you're the one who's trying to create a new category, and the people who might not be aware of that particular problem, and so category creation. How do you think about that?
Oh my God, I have horrible experiences.
Okay. Okay.
I think I could spend hours on this.
Okay.
Well, okay. So I'll try to give you a two minute version of it. I think when you're creating a category, you've got to be very careful, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of founders, a lot of startup companies fall into this trap. So you really got to look at the category itself, and you really got to look at, forget about the product that you're offering. I think a lot of category creation comes with the false sense of, I've got this phenomenal product, and I'm gonna create the next iPhone experience.
Okay.
I'm gonna create the next whatever experience that online music, and all of that, all of those new category creations that Apple and Microsoft and all of these big companies have created. I think they happen and they're unicorns, but I think category creation becomes a unicorn. And if you feel like as a startup you're onto a category creation, stop, right? So maybe a couple of examples that I can give you. And it's going to sound a little repetitive, but and I think if your buyers are not aware of the problem, they're not aware that they're feeling that problem, and they're not aware of how critical that problem is. Now, all of a sudden, you got to educate them, right?
Sure.
But I think the education piece cannot start with the product. I think a lot of category creation fails when you show up with the product, and then the customer who is not sure of the problem, you haven't sold them the problem yet. You jumped 3 steps ahead and you try to shove the solution down their throat, and they're like, I don't need this stuff yet. So I think you've got to start with the problem, and you almost have to sell them the problem, and almost help them quantify what the problem is costing them. Again, work backwards from an ROI, but start with the ROI, or start with the ROI of the problem. And I think when you figure that out, then you can look at how the product is solving that. So don't start with the product. start with the problem. You almost have to approach these conversations without showing up and throwing up. I call it like showing up and like, hey, here's a better future, and I can show you. There's a human psychology. I don't know if you heard of it. There's how do you get somebody from a positive present, so everything is fine right now, to a positive future. So the way in psychology, I'm not a psychologist, but I learned the human behavior is you're going to take them from a positive present to a negative present, then to a positive future. So I think a lot of salespeople and founders try to take people from a positive present, right, to a positive future, skipping that in between process.
Okay, so that's great. So then there's another topic, I guess, which keeps coming up again and again, is and maybe with the current engagement that you have. So how are you dividing your resources and attention between branding and demand generation? Like, what percentage goes in which particular direction?
Branding and demand gen. It depends on where you are, which stage you're in as a company. I think if you're a startup, Saad, you are probably, my recommendation would be you put all of your energy in demand gen, because you need leads, you need opportunities, you need revenue, especially if you're bootstrapped. You don't have a lot of VC funding. Now, if you have VC funding, that's different, because you probably already figured out a product market fit. You already have a good idea of your ICP and your go-to-market and things like that. I mean, it's probably premature, but you figured something out, right? You're onto something. You're probably doing $500,000 or $1 million in revenue. So you're onto something. So now you got to figure out how to scale it. At that point, I think you start going from 100% demand gen and pipe to maybe 80%, 70%. I cannot give you like percentages. I'm just kind of giving you directional, right?
Okay.
You still do majority demand gen, and then you start building your brand, because I think brand becomes important, right? And then I think when you get to a Series B or a Series C or a $20 million or $30 million, now you're more repeatable. You've got a good market share. You're gaining market share, and you're fine-tuned at least the basics, the foundational level of your go-to-market. And I think at that point, you can kind of go like a 50-50, because now you got to build communities. You got to build communities around your product. You got to build communities around, your brand. You got to get your users and your, everybody that is interacting with your products and solutions. You want to kind of build that community. And I think you need to do that. You cannot do that through demand gen. You got to do that with the branding part of it. But you can never, I don't think, you can be $1 billion company and you still need to spend half of your budget on demand gen, right? It's not like my brand is going to sell itself. You always got to do demand gen, especially these days.
Okay, and especially these days, so all the money has dried up, so things aren't that great, and it seems like the money from marketing has gone away, and it's just focused onto the sales. It's just sell, call, email people, and fill their inboxes and see what comes out of it. So is this the case with you also?
Well, not in the current company that I'm in, I think, but I've seen it. I think I've seen it. I've seen people without diagnosing the problem, or without diagnosing that the bottleneck in the pipe. I think people try different things, hoping that it will stick. So, example, I think a lot of companies, you probably know, during COVID, post-COVID, cut marketing, right? Like, we're not spending, we don't have money. It's a bad time. All right, we're gonna get rid of marketing spend, and we're gonna slash it into half, or whatever the case is. They're paying for those decisions that they made. They ended up paying. You got to stay in the game, right? I know when the times are tough, it's hard to go to the board or your CEO and say, we got to keep spending, because you got to save up for the rainy day. And I think a lot of those companies that stopped, and all of a sudden when the floodgates open and the demand started picking back up, 2022, 2023, now into 2024, Again, depending on the market that you're in, but things are improving, right? I mean, I think it's much better than it used to be during COVID. So I think the demand is coming back, and now you realize, holy crap, now I got to double my spend on marketing. But now you're too late, right? Because by the time you prime the pump and you build those motions in place and you bring the marketing people in, you're 12 months, 18 months behind your competitors. So you got to stay in the game and you got to continue to use the muscle. I think a lot of companies, when they go to the other extreme, they start slashing and then they lose the muscle. And then it takes like going to the gym. You stop going to the gym for 3-4 months, you start going back to the gym, you start getting muscle spasms, right? You can't lift the same weight that you did 4 or 5 months ago. So you got to keep at it, but you cannot keep at it at the same budget levels. You got to keep it moderate, but you cannot go from 100 to 0. You got to go from 100 to maybe 40 to 50.
Yeah, and in addition to COVID, obviously AI have happened. Okay, so the Chat GPT is here and everything is here. So how are you using it with your GTM motion, with your marketing content, and with your sales motion? What's your utility? Do you see it like a force multiplier, or do you see like maybe it will get there somewhere down the road?
I think, my honest and humble opinion is it's still too early. I have not personally. I mean, we've dipped and dabbed with different AI tools on, voice recording and sales automation and outbound and even in the customer success, kind of like looking at scorecard and product utilizations and things like that. So we've trialed and errored and tested across the spectrum, and I can tell you right now, I have not seen, like, there's no ROI. If you ask me the question today, Baris, like, all these couple of things that you're trialing, Aaron, are you seeing a good return on your investment? Are you seeing efficiencies? Can you actually, touch and feel the positive impact of these machine learning and AI tools? I cannot tell you, not yet. I mean, I'm seeing some positive signs, and especially in the prospecting side of things, and also like conversation intelligence. Like we've tried a couple of tools in the conversation intelligence, so to make sure that our sales team and our account executives, new logo, and our account managers, our existing customer reps, are having the right discovery and demo and dialogues with prospects. And we're trying to kind of, measure those and quantify them and see, who's having better outcomes than the other. So it's too early to tell. It's a little bit too early to tell, but it's insightful. I mean, I think to a CRO, they're insightful, and I think it teaches you certain things, but I'm not sure if I can actually put my finger on it and tell you, we save millions of dollars when we use this tool.
So in terms of your stack, I mean, so you maybe you're trying with different tools, plugins to help you get better. So where have you seen any output, any positive output? You mentioned some of those, but maybe if you want to go deeper, is it in discovery? Is it in intent? Where have you seen any positive impact?
I think the mundane tasks of what salespeople do, putting stuff in Salesforce and updating forecast and pipe, I think a lot of those manual, I wouldn't call them manual, but I mean, everything that goes into the Salesforce or your CRM, and the time that it takes for, especially if you have a very laborious sales metrics and data that you're trying to track, because everybody wants to track everything, right? And they all want it to be in CRM, and they put a lot of pressure on the Salesforce to put all this data. But I used to be a sales guy. I don't know about you, but I hate it. I hated updating my contacts and my fire forecast and my pipeline and competitors and every field that you have. So I think there's something there in terms of efficiency gains in having AI and machine learning kind of pull all of that and help the salesperson. be more effective and productive. Because look, everybody's trying to squeeze whatever they can from their salespeople. Salespeople are expensive, especially if you're selling to the enterprise, and you cannot ask these salespeople who are paid really well, and when they close a deal, they make good money in commission, right? I think those days are gone. I think those days of, hey, Jennifer, hey, Mark, I need you to update this and that. Like, if you can automate that stuff, I think those tools are getting better traction. And the conversational AI, the conversational monitoring of the quality of the dialogues with customers, I think that's also very helpful in terms of onboarding your people, teaching them, training them, enabling them, and making sure that they're actually know how to handle an objection. Like an objection comes up, like, oh my God, like I've never heard of this objection. How do I handle it? And it's right there in front of them, and they betrayed on it, and the AI helps them, and then they kind of do it, and then they see if it works, and then look at if the customer's reaction is positive or negative, and how did the conversation go from there? Did it tank, or did it improve? So I think those things are very helpful with AI.
Okay, so in terms of channels, so you have this email, you have this outbound, you have this events, and where do you see that there's still some juice there, where there's still you can get some ROI out of it, and which channels are dying at the moment?
I think the days of outbound, the way it used to be done, I think everybody talks about this, right? Is that you just can't pick up the phone, and your conversion rates and click-through rates and open rates. I mean, I think AI is making it worse. But I think I wouldn't want to be an SDR these days. I think it's the toughest. I think it's the toughest job that is out there. Other than maybe a firefighter or a police or like dangerous jobs, but SDR is becoming really dangerous because, yeah, I mean, they're making thousands of calls and they're probably getting a hold of one or two people. And it's hard. So I think it's a combination of, this goes back to your earlier question. How do you get smarter? Looking at whatever data you can look at, your marketing leader, your SDR leaders, BDR leaders. I think every leader needs to be having a very meaningful but thoughtful conversation around the content. And I think a lot of people spend a lot of time on the motion. We need this many calls, and we need to have this many emails, and we need to do this many things, and then like doing more of what doesn't work. Isn't that the definition of insanity and expecting different results, right? So I think a lot of go-to-market organizations needs to stop, and they will find, and we've done this ourselves, like we have found, well, wait a second, this BDR partnered with this account executive and the marketing people, and they came up with this creative content. They really tailored it to these 10 accounts. And then they pushed that content, whether it was an email or email backed up with a phone, like a follow-up phone, or whatever the case, whatever that cadence is, they figured something out, and then you kind of need to look at that. But I think that starts with, to your question, I think that starts with, there's no one magic bullet. I think a lot of companies try to figure it out. Okay, is it just outbound or is it inbound? Or I think it's both. I think it's both, and complemented with both digital and physical, doing events, getting in front of people, having thought leadership conferences, podcasts. I mean, a lot of people are doing podcasts. I think you're going to try and see what your market, what your customers are consuming. Where are they consuming this content? And again, goes back to what I said earlier. What's the emergency? What's the crises that's keeping them up at night? And I think if you can create a content between your marketing people, your outbound team, your inbound team, and your salespeople, and they kind of collaborate, I think that combination is the best combination. But it's not one thing. I think it's just utilizing all these resources that you have and bringing them together. I think we live in an era now there's no time that all of these functions have to unite, right? Back in the day, I remember I don't even have to go 10 years ago, like 5 years ago, marketing kind of did their own thing and they kind of lived their own silo, and that kind of worked. Sales kind of, did their own thing, and it kind of worked. And then, the SDRs or whatever, the outbound team or the inbound team was kind of like, they did their own thing and it kind of worked. But then there was not a lot of synergy. That playbook is not going to work. It does not work.
Okay, that's awesome. So I guess we're coming towards the close. I see some books. So recommend 3 books who wants to get better at this, or maybe your favorite 3 books that you've read and you want to just share it with the world.
Oh, like favorite people that I follow?
Yeah, people you follow, the books that you've read, and any recommendation. Who wants to get better at this game, marketing sales game?
Oh man, that's a great question. I mean, I can't give you one. I'll give you a couple of them. I mean, I think, I mean, I don't know if you can see it. I can. I've done a lot of self-improvement myself, but I think you pick up something from every podcast or a playbook or book that you read. So my favorite is the Challenger Sale. I think they have 2 versions of it. The red book, I think, was the Challenger Sale, and then the second one was the Challenger Sale, the Customer, right? That's been my favorite from a book perspective. That's been my favorite book. I think Jack Welch wrote the best book on winning. I think that goes way back when he was at GE, and that's one of my favorites. So I think those are the classicals that you can think of that kind of gives you the foundational level. I mean, Simon Sinek is I think on a leadership, leaders eat last is one. Start with your why. I mean, Simon Sinek is a great thought leader in leadership and how you transform companies and yourself. From a podcast perspective, like I listen to SaaStr, Jason Lemkin. I don't know if you know him. SaaStr is big. I think you can learn, whether you're a startup or you're an established company. I think there's a lot of lessons that Jason brings a good order of balance of content for marketing leaders and sales leaders and go-to-market leaders and CEOs and CFOs and CMOs and all of that. I think SaaStr is one of them. So those are the ones that I would tell you off the top of my head that I kind of try to follow as much as I can. Harvard Business Review. So HBR is the other one. I think HBR publishes great articles around people and culture and HR. And I think those are the things that we can always get better as leaders. So those are the top of my head.
Okay, that's awesome. So anything that I missed, if you want to share?
No, I think you've touched it all. I think the only thing that I would add is go-to-market is complex. I think go-to-market is, where you are as a company. I think everybody needs to, I made this mistake multiple times. I think you asked that question. I think that was one of my favorite questions if I had to pick one, which is where do you start? Like, where do you start? And I think where you start is, the best way you can assess a company and its people and everything else is, you roll up your sleeves and, you start asking the right questions. I think you'll learn what the right questions are when you're trying to figure out the go-to-market. But go-to-market is complex, but I think you can simplify it. There's no one way to simplify it, but I think it comes down to where the company is, what stage in its evolution the company is. Like you said, are they in the early stages? We touched on that. Are they kind of in the scale mode? Have they just raised a lot of funds and now they're trying to figure out their product go-to-market fit? Or are they really in the growth mode? They just need to hire a bunch of salespeople and go make it happen. So I think depending on all those stages, but you need to almost stop and think where you are and then apply the right remedy, the right medicine. But you got to diagnose it first before you prescribe the wrong medicine, because I think a large company playbook is not going to have, it's not going to work for the small company and vice versa. So that's the only thing that I would add, Saad. But this was very good. Great conversation.
No, this is awesome. I really love this conversation. We could have actually continued for an hour, but I think
okay.
So where can people find you?
Where can people find me? I think on LinkedIn. I mean, you can go to LinkedIn and look at my name, Baris Vural. That's probably the best way to find me. Yeah, I think I'm the only one with this name. I got a unique name. It's Turkish. And you don't find a lot of it's not a common name like John Smith or Michael.
Yeah.
I think if they type in my name, they shouldn't struggle to find me.
Yeah, that's a fairly unique and distinct feature, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
I'm kind of lucky that way. Yes.
yeah. So I truly love the conversation.
Yeah, that'll work.
So,
no, I appreciate you reaching out, and this was the feeling is mutual. I really enjoyed this one.
Okay. So have an awesome day, an awesome week.
All right,
Bye-bye.
you too.
Take care. Bye.
Care. All right, bye.
Bye.